Hi everyone and welcome. I'm out here in my garden, and usually when I come out here, the only reason I'm filming is because I'm tending to my outdoor worm bin. So my outdoor worm bin is actually a bag. It's these two grow bags, one inside the other, and that's only because one of them has a pretty good sized hole in it. But I'm out here today to give this bin a little bit of food, because at this point, after loading worms into it 4 separate times, I'm estimating that I've got about 3,200 worms in here. I know it seems very specific, but on each occasion I tried to estimate how many worms I was putting in there, and I just came up to the number of 3,200. So we'll see what we end up with today, because today, again, besides feeding, I'm going into my outdoor compost bin, which is this big huge tub right here, and it's more or less kitchen scraps, stuff that comes out of my garden, and usually it's just worms, but in the summertime it also gets occupied by black soldier fly larvae, and it does a great job composting all of my stuff. And what happens is the worms just come out of the soil because the container has some holes. They come right out of the soil and occupy this bin. So I'm going to be pulling worms out of here to load more worms into here. And who knows, maybe by the end of the day this bin is going to be up to maybe a population of, who knows, maybe even 4,000 or more worms. So let's get to work first on here, pulling worms out, then we'll get down into here. So the last time I was in here was a week ago. And it was at that point, it was the night after I had been in here last, that the temperatures in my area dropped quite a bit overnight. So it was 2 evenings where the temperature had gotten down to 42 degrees, 41 degrees. And it made me start wondering whether I've still got black soldier flies in here, because they generally need a much warmer temperature, and I don't know if those cool temperatures rolling through may have been too cold for them, might have knocked them out. So I'm not sure what to expect in here. I think I'm going to begin by using the lid of one of my trash pails just to pull off a lot of this uncomposted food, give me slightly better access to what I'm doing right below. So the trash pail lid is right here. I guess it's not visible on the camera, but I'm just going to go ahead and start scooping off a lot of these most recently added food items that I threw in here. There's a whole variety of different stuff. You can see all kinds of lemons and peppers and banana peels, coffee, you name it. What's right below it is the results of me doing a little bit of weeding. I had gone through and pulled some weeds out alongside the edge of my fence, and that's what you see right below, a lot of the kitchen scraps that we're removing. It is quite a bit, so I think by removing it we'll have a much easier time getting down to the area where we believe that the worms might be. And it's by this time that I would typically expect to start seeing black soldier fly larvae cruising all over the place. And, well, I could already feel their heat. I could feel their warmth, and we're finally getting down to where there are some black soldier fly larvae cruising around down here. So that's the one thing you'll notice if you ever have black soldier fly larvae in your bins. These little guys, they kick off a tremendous amount of heat while they're feeding, and they eat very quickly. So I'm glad to see that they're still in here and in great numbers. But it is late September here, and the temperatures will be dropping soon, in the overnight temperatures especially. So I expect that they'll be done soon. And at some point soon, this will just simply become a worm bin, at least until next springtime when the black soldier flies return, if I'm lucky. There's a lot of stuff in here. I think some of the other stuff that was placed in here since last week's visit was a whole bunch of corn husks. There's a whole bunch of that in here, as well as the silk. And the lid of my trash pail is starting to get quite heavy at this point. And it is virtually overflowing, which I don't want to have happen. I don't want to be picking this stuff off the ground, so I'm going to cut myself off here, I think, before I end up dropping the whole shebang on the ground and having a whole bunch of cleanup to do as a result. So I think we're ready to go fishing for worms. The level in here drops quite a bit when you remove all that stuff. But at some point in the near future, I do think I'm going to have to try to get down below where all the uncomposted stuff is and remove a lot of the finished compost out of here. I'm not quite sure how to go about doing that quite yet, but I do foresee that happening at some point in the near future. So it is very mucky and gooey, so I don't see myself really being able to separate the worms from the stuff. So I've simply been taking it as is and moving the whole shebang over into the new worm bin, and then all the stuff that goes with them is stuff that I can consider as part of their feeding as well. I suppose the other thing that's a little bit difficult to do here is to try to estimate the number of worms, since they are commingled with a whole bunch of other stuff surrounding them. And you're going to notice that I'm also bringing over black soldier fly larvae as a part of this. I'm not worried about having black soldier flies in my worm bin, because I know pretty soon they're going to be toast once the cool temperatures arrive. I know a lot of people post photographs up in the Facebook groups and on Reddit and stuff where, you know, people talk about vermicomposting topics. So a lot of people notice the black soldier fly larvae in their bins and panic a little bit, but you know, they soon find out that having these little guys in your worm bin is usually a fairly beneficial thing, and that they should be thankful for having them, because they are incredible composters and they just burn through food so quickly. We don't want these guys escaping. It does look like we're coming up with a pretty good haul of worms here. The main reason I'm trying to inspect them along the way as I'm doing this is because I do want to try to get a rough estimate of how many I'm putting in here. And even though the estimate is probably not much better than a guess, it's better than nothing. I think when I'm doing my my worm bins down in my basement and I'm able to really separate the worms from the castings and the other material that they're inhabiting, and I put this stuff on the scale, I think I get a much better read on how many worms I'm dealing with. And I also get a much better visual sense of how many I have just by seeing them and looking at them. But out here, when I'm doing it this way, I feel like I'm really kind of flying blind, and I don't know what I'm ending up with. So I do also turn to the audience to see if people will offer their suggestions as to how many they think they saw me pull out of here. That's the reason I'll try to show each handful to the best of my ability on the video, because then who knows, maybe my guess is way off. Maybe everyone out there has a much better guess. Then I'll typically go with just an average of what everyone thinks it is, and then I'll record it down in my tracking spreadsheet. But it's really just for my own purposes. There's really no real important reason for keeping track of that number. I just like to try to know what kind of a bin I'm dealing with. And I think after this batch of worms gets added to my outdoor worm bin, we're going to be talking about a pretty densely populated bag of worms over there, which is pretty cool. There is a lot of uncomposted material down in this bin, that's for sure. And things will slow down. The activity will slow down a lot once the black soldier flies are gone. And even when the cold temperatures roll in, the worms themselves will also tend to slow down a great deal as well. I don't think I've dug this deep yet, so I'm curious to see what I'll get if I dig really deep down. It seems like the worms are pretty much everywhere. It doesn't seem to matter where I look for them. It is kind of cool though. I mean, every place you look, there's just worms all over the place. Worms, 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 all over the place. I think I am getting pretty close to being full on this container. So I'm thinking maybe if I could see another really tempting handful of a lot of worms, let's see if we can get a good tempting handful from as low as I can get. Let's see what I see. Be not quite as fruitful as the last go around. Maybe there's a distinction between one side of the bin and the other. I'm not sure. Yeah, you know, I don't need to go crazy here. I've got room in here for maybe 1 or 2 more handfuls. Let's do that. Just take whatever we see here right on the top, stuff that has worms in it quite clearly. Well, I bet the birds overhead are probably watching what I'm doing, thinking to themselves, oh boy, look at all those worms. You can hear the birds telling all the neighbors, hey, check out what this guy's got over here. I'm not even sure if you can hear that bird squawking, but I'm just imagining him seeing what I've got going on here and getting kind of excited. Probably thinking I'm just going to walk away and then they can come in here and have their fill of worms. Although I doubt that would really happen, but you never know. Who knows? Alright, I told myself 1 or 2 more handfuls. I don't want to have an overflowing container here. I think we're good. So let me cover this whole shebang back up over here, and then we'll get off to releasing these little guys into their new home. I'm going to put the weeds right on top to try to minimize how much intrusion I get in here. You might have noticed on the cardboard right before I removed it there were animal tracks on it. So besides all the bugs that you see cruising around over here trying to take advantage of this food supply, you've also got creatures like, I guess in this case, a raccoon coming by to try to grab a bite to eat as well. So I think we're in pretty good shape here. I'm going to move this thing aside and we're going to get the outdoor worm bin set to go. Oh, there I did it again. I destroyed another pair of gloves. The outdoor worm bin and the outdoor compost bin seem to really be kind of a rough environment for these relatively thin gloves. So here in the outdoor worm bag, you can see I've got numerous coverings, but I think it's that this covering right here that does the biggest thing, which is, it's just a sheet of plastic. It's a plastic bag laying flat over the surface, but you can see its main purpose is to, you can see drops of water all over the place. Anytime moisture tries to escape from this bin through evaporation, the plastic will capture that escaping moisture, or moisture that's trying to escape, and keep it down within the bin. And that's really all I'm after when it comes to this. So it was only a week ago that I was last in here, but you can also see that I've been in here more recently, putting garden scraps in here too. I was just pruning some of my pepper plants, and I put a whole bunch of the leaves that I had removed off those pepper plants down into here. And the last time we were in here prior, when I actually shot some video of it, we had taken a lot of this dry grass that was sitting along the edge of my fence, and we used that as the top covering. So I think before we go probing down into here to open up a nice hole to drop the food into, we're just going to give this whole bin a little inspection, see how things are progressing here. There's a bin with a few thousand worms in it. Should be pretty active, assuming they're all still here. I haven't really seen many worms yet. So now as we get a little bit deeper down, I'm starting to see some worms. A lot of times I do wonder if maybe the worms are just able to come and go freely and just pass through the fabric material and leave if they don't like something in here. I'm starting to wonder if that may have happened here, because if this was really occupied by 3,000 or more worms, you would expect to see a fair number of them by now. And you know, if I just stop moving, maybe it's just that they're blending in pretty good, because once I stop moving I could see things squirming around all over the place. And I am seeing a fair bit of worms now. I guess I was just sort of expecting to see a whole bunch of worms right down the middle, which is where I normally feed my worm bins, but I don't recall if that was where the last feeding had been placed in here. I think last time I was in here I did do a feeding, and here's that cork that we've been tracking the progress of. I'm always amazed when I bump into that thing. But I guess it is a slightly larger object, so you're normally expecting to find pretty small things, or even things that are a little bit bigger, they just crumble apart. But something like that cork is going to stay pretty solid for a long time. So, I don't know, I'm not really sure what's going on here. I kind of expected to see maybe a little bit more worm action in here. But I have to remain confident that there probably are just as many worms in here as I had estimated or calculated. Estimated and calculated. And some of the stuff in here is rather dry. It's weird that you would go down and you would find a handful of almost completely dry leaves. Although it doesn't seem to put the worms off too much, because I do see worms hanging out within it. Just wondering if maybe moisture is a bit of an issue in here. Maybe there's just not enough dampness. Maybe it is driving the worms away. But then again, if that were true, then wouldn't they have all left? Maybe I'm just not seeing them all. I think that that's probably the better explanation as to what we're observing here. So I'm not going to worry. I've also got to take into account the fact that the volume of this container is pretty good size, so there's plenty of room for them to be in here. So they're probably just spread out and I'm not seeing them all. So my thought here was to take the food that I bought out here for them, which is just a big pile of cut up cabbage leaves. These are just the outer leaves of the cabbage. All the inner portions of it were used for a recipe, and these are just the outer leaves of the head of cabbage, which are a little bit tougher and not as tasty, I guess. So those usually come off and turn into compost. So the worms are getting that, and that was quite a bit. I would have to say that must have been at least a pound of cabbage leaves right there. And what I'm scattering into the feeding now is just a whole bunch of eggshell, pulverized eggshell, which the worms need to go hand in hand with what they're eating to serve as the grit that they use in their gizzards to break down the food that they're consuming. So I was just trying to see if I could find that cork again. Not that it's really important, but I usually try to place it over the center of my bin so I can know where to find it next time I come back in here to check on my bin. So all I'm doing here now is I'm just kind of taking these various materials that had been used as top cover, bedding, whatnot, kind of stirring them together. I thought maybe the dry grass and the fresh leaves kind of mixed together might amount to a slightly more hospitable space for the worms. So I've got myself a pretty good landing pad here to drop in our new inhabitants. So before I do that, I'm just putting the cork back in. So now here we go. You can see it's almost full. I might not have gone quite as heaping full as I have in the past this time, but it doesn't matter. I think we're probably doing pretty good here too. I think we got ourselves at least a few hundred worms. So as I spread this out, this will be our last chance to see how many worms we were able to collect. And it looks like we got ourselves quite a number here. Pretty cool. So I'm going to let them get situated. I'm going to just observe this for a while, see if I can get a rough estimate of how many there are. I think the worms themselves have actually all retreated down into the bed at this point. All I see really moving on the surface are black soldier fly larvae, and they do seem very lethargic. I mean, it's still around 70 degrees, it's still in the morning. We're going to go up to 80 today, and that might help them get a little more active. But overnight it was pretty cool, so maybe that was just enough to kind of take their energy away and kind of make them slow down a little bit. But yeah, I think we're done here. You can see I've already gotten rid of my glove. While we were letting the worms retreat down into the material, I took the time to run over to the garden hose and clean off the container that we had collected the worms in. And at that time it seemed sensible just to get rid of the glove. It's trash at this point. So we're doing pretty good in here. I'm not sure. I'm going to just go ahead and use a number like 800, I think, you know, because if my previous estimate of the population of this bin was 3,200, I kind of like the idea of rounding that out to 4,000 by estimating that this haul of worms amounted to another 800 population, to expand on what's in here already. So I don't know. I'd love to hear what you think. How many worms do you think we had just moved over into here? Put your comments down below, and I'd be looking forward to hearing what everyone thinks. Alright everyone, I've got a little bit more cleaning up and putting things away to take care of over here, but I'm not going to bore you with that. I'm just going to take this as an opportunity to say thank you. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate your company, and I really hope you enjoyed the video too. If you did, please, by all means, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And also, if you haven't done so already, consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Bye now.